She left you some food.
Oh, thank you.
So we starting over or no?
Probably too long.
I'll tell you how long we've been going. Let's see, that one was in here 97.5 minutes.
7.5? All right. We can do 7.5. And I'll just skip the video. Okay, and I'll abridge a little of it. Okay, so functions of the reproductive systems: create new organisms, which it does mostly by producing gametes, the eggs and sperm, and then in some cases housing and nourishing the developing offspring. For humans, the females do that with gestation in the uterus and milk production. There are also social and psychological functions for the reproductive system in humans, our relatives, the chimpanzees and dolphins, where it's part of a relationship in some cases. The gametes are the eggs and sperm. Technical terms for them are spermatocytes and oocytes. They are different from other cells because they have half the DNA, which we'll talk about coming up. Out of the 46 chromosomes in a typical human cell, those are in pairs, so a gamete has one from each pair for 23 chromosomes. The testes are the gonads of the male. Those are the organs that produce the gametes and also the hormones. And then accessory organs are structures that conduct the gametes, produce other fluids, and then the external ones, also known as genitalia, for the male are the penis and scrotum. The testes are made up of seminiferous tubules, which are these long coiled tubes that on the inside have cells that produce the sperm. And then between seminiferous tubules are interstitial cells that produce the hormones. So it's separate cells making the sperm and the hormones, which is mostly testosterone. Sperm production is called spermatogenesis. The starting cells are spermatogonia that are around the edges of the seminiferous tubules. As they form into sperm, they move toward the center of the tube. Special division to get sperm or gametes in general instead of regular cells is meiosis, where mitosis replicates the DNA and then divides, leaving two cells with a full set of DNA. Meiosis replicates the DNA, but then it divides twice. So you have twice as many daughter cells with half the DNA. And that just lays out the divisions like here. And we'll skip the video because you can watch it in the PowerPoint. A fully formed sperm has a unique shape. The head is the part that contains the nucleus. It has kind of a cap on it called an acrosome. The acrosome contains enzymes that help the sperm break through the coating on the egg. Attached to the head is an area called either the midpiece or the body. That has the mitochondria to provide energy so the sperm can swim. And then the tail is the part that it swims with, and that is an organelle called a flagellum. Flagellum is Latin for whip, describes the way it moves. Questions on sperm structure?
Looks like a worm.
Good idea. Doesn't quite move like one where the entire worm goes. You see the head's fairly steady with the tails whipping like crazy.
Is it possible to see them, like?
Yeah, I've actually got a slide with sperm, so, you know, they're dead and preserved, but yeah, we can get them in lab. If you want to see them swimming, you need fresh ones. So from the testes, the sperm will move through two areas. Start with, here's one testis. There's a structure on top of it that's kind of coiled up, comes down the side. That's called the epididymis. Testes is Latin, didymis is Greek for testes, so epi is the thing that's on top of the testes. The sperm are formed in the testes and then move into the epididymis to mature. And then from the bottom of the epididymis and going up into the pelvic cavity is the ductus deferens, also called the vas deferens, where vas means vessel, ductus means tube. The sperm are stored in here until the complete semen forms right before ejaculation. That process is called emission. The ductus deferens goes up into the pelvic cavity, around behind the bladder, where it will go into another tube, which is fairly short, called the ejaculatory duct. Here's the bladder from behind. Underneath it, which we'll get to coming up, is the prostate gland. Ductus deferens comes around like this, one from each testis. And then the ejaculatory duct is inside the prostate. There's an additional gland that's behind the bladder called either seminal gland or seminal vesicle. You'll see both used. And it's next to the ductus deferens. They combine to form the ejaculatory duct. So those are the tubes that the sperm actually pass through. The seminal vesicles or seminal glands behind the bladder produce the largest portion of the fluid in semen. So the sperm from the ductus deferens, the fluids from the seminal gland move into the ejaculatory duct together and into the prostate. The urethra passes through the prostate. The ejaculatory ducts come into the prostate and enter the urethra. And that's where the semen is going to form, is in the urethra within the prostate gland. And then there's one other set of glands below the prostate called vulvourethral glands. And that's a pair on each side of the urethra. So the seminal glands produce most of the fluid, prostate produces a little more fluid, as the sperm and seminal fluids combine. The bulbourethral glands mostly produce mucus that lubricates the urethra so the semen can move through it more easily. This puts together the two different drawings I've got. Here's the testis, epididymis, ductus deferens comes in and around. That's the seminal vesicle, prostate, bulbourethral glands. And then this isn't showing the first part of the urethra coming from the bladder, but then here's the rest of it. Questions on these internal male structures? The scrotum is the skin around the testes. Two things that make it different from other skin. It doesn't have much subcutaneous fat. The reason for that is the same as the reason the testes are in the scrotum in the first place instead of in the pelvic cavity where they'd be safer. And that's that sperm production works best a few degrees cooler than body temperature. So they're held on the outside. You don't want too much insulation to keep them warmer. But then if it gets too cold, there are muscles in the scrotum that can pull the testes closer to the body to keep them from getting too cold. The other external structure is the penis that does have parts within the pelvic floor. It's not just on the outside. Its function is a passageway for both urine and semen to exit the body. The urethra passes right through it. And as part of delivering the semen, it can form an erection, which allows depositing the semen deep in the vagina to get it closer to an egg that is going to fertilize. This is the pelvic cavity. The external parts are the body or shaft and the glands. Notice there's no D in that. It's not a gland that's going to secrete something. It's glands, which means walnut, so it's named for its shape. And that's what might colloquially be called the head of the penis. In its natural form, there's an additional layer of skin covering the glands that's called the prepuce, or the foreskin. It's been typical practice in the U.S. for about 100 years to remove that at birth or within a few days. That's called circumcision.
I thought that only happened to Jewish.
Well, Judaism requires it, but it's also been fairly common in the U.S., not so much in Europe.
No, Hispanics really don't get much.
Yeah.
Hispanic or the Latino culture.
Yeah, and it's also on the decrease. What's not that well known is that it actually started with John Harvey Kellogg, brother of the Kellogg's cereal company guy, who had this, all these health centers and was kind of anti-sex. And he said that circumcision would prevent masturbation, and got people started doing it. And then it kept going for generations because the dads were like, well, it should look like mine, right? So let's take it off. And then more recently, there's been kind of a back to nature movement, or just a this isn't necessary movement. And so it's been on the decrease. But time was pretty much all the men in the U.S. were circumcised, whether they were Jewish or not.
Doesn't it help too, like, I mean, if you're younger or whatever, because you technically have to pull it back to clean yourself?
Actually, you don't.
No?
Until puberty, it's attached. It doesn't pull back. Though in puberty, yeah, it helps to pull it back in the shower to help rinse off the layers in between because it folds over, kind of like that. The actual purpose of the foreskin is it's extra skin for erection. Without the foreskin, sometimes that skin has to be pulled from the scrotum, so the scrotum tightens up during erection.
Interesting.
Anything else? Okay. Inside the penis, there's erectile tissue, which is 3 chambers of tissue that can hold blood. And it's kind of like how a water balloon is more solid. And that's what causes the erection, the stiffening and enlargement. There's a pair that are at the top part of the penis called corpora cavernosa. The erectile tissues continue into the pelvic floor, and you'll sometimes see this called the root